Live. Everybody, welcome back to the collective. We have another awesome guest list, as you can see. Tip and John joining us. Shaun, how's everybody doing today?
Great.
All good. All good.
All good here too. Yeah.
So before we get into anything too deep, anybody got any thoughts or feelings or anything that they want to get out in the air, into the open before we dive in? We're all good?
We're speaking about adaptability today. Is that what we're doing?
Adaptability. This is
like
the key. So, okay, well, let's just dive into it then. We got, I was thinking about this the other day, that the military especially, but not just the military, a lot of other organizations do this as well. They preach adapt and overcome, right? There's a lot of talk about, you need to be able to adapt, you need to be able to overcome, you got to be able to find a solution and then just figure it out and work on it, so on and so forth. But they're also extremely dogmatic organizations, in that there is one way to do things and there is only one way to do things. It is our way of doing things. And I'm wondering, one of the challenges of when I first got out was getting over that hump of, this is the way I do things. Period. End of discussion. You all sort yourselves out to manage me, right? How do we, as Shaun likes to put it, be like water? How do we get over that hump? How do we ride that wave over the impediment that's in our way? And well, let me ask, let's start with Tip. How did you get over that hump, or did you even experience that?
I would say I have fully. It's not that I'm not expecting to, but I haven't fully experienced it. And I think when you say the times in the military where you overcome, you adapt, it's something that we really lived by in the Royal Marines. That ability to adapt and be dynamic is, and I could see this in a lot of military people. And I spent a long time in the Royal Marines, and I'd say other services, and that ability to be dynamic with what direction you're given and what orders you're given, stand within bounds, but use that full spectrum of what's available to you. You have to adapt, and especially what assets you have available, but also weather, terrain, people, injuries, enemy threat, all those things. You have to be, like water. You have to move and adapt and overcome in some stage. So for me, I sort of mapped that across into my new career as an actor, as a civilian. I think that it's a massive, massive strength being as adaptable and as dynamic as what I've been conditioned in the military. It helps me. So it's never been a real challenge to me. I think I've used it more as one of our tools, really.
Awesome. John, thoughts? Did you struggle with this at all?
No, I really haven't actually, since I've been out. I think for myself, the adapt and overcome, we it's everything but the military. That's all they talk about. You get injured, you adapt, you overcome. It's just, you gotta suck it up kind of thing. But I think for myself, I learned that at a very young age. How to adapt and overcome. My two parents passed away when I was 13, and I had nowhere to go. I had no relatives. I lived in a car. I was homeless. Talk about adapting, right?
Dang, dude.
Yeah,
like 13 years old, and there I am. I had no family. Like really, some relatives really didn't want me, to stay with them and stuff like that. So I ended up living with friends, and these friends had nothing. Like, they were friends of my mom before she passed, and like they had nothing, man. They were so, they built me a small bedroom that was a closet. And so when you think about adapt and overcome, right, at 13 years old, I think I started learning that skill right away. Going out and I got a job, like, 14, I had pretty much a full-time job while I was going to school. So I just adapted. One thing I was determined. I'm graduating. I put that in my head, and I'm like, I'm going to do that. So I had to adapt a lot. I had to figure out how I was going to work, bring money in to survive, but yet still go to school every day, try to maintain a teenage lifestyle and stuff like that. So it was pretty hard. And when I joined the military, I was already seasoned to that, really adapting and overcoming. But then the military really, really shoves it down your throat, kind of, everything we do. And but yeah, I was just good at it. And being with Recce Platoon, going out, you're adapting everything. Like, you go on patrol, they tell you to set up a position here. You get there and the enemy's sitting there. So you're moving your OP to a different location, or or the route you're given turns out it's a swamp, and you're changing route, you're adapting every day. But I feel like life as a general, from the day you're born to the time you're underground, is you're adapting to everything. You're adapting. Like, an example, I was sitting here just getting ready to log on, and I was like, man, I don't got a link to log on. Like, what am I going to do? So I'm going through old links and stuff like that, and then I called Chance up. I'm like, hey, man, I don't got a link. He's like, I didn't send it yet. I'm like, well, there you go, right? But I was willing to adapt. I started going through old emails, and you just kind of learn how to adapt it. And so was there a struggle when I first get out? I don't think so. No, I think I just kind of carried on where I was before I joined the military, and and started adapting. Not as such as I'm not as fierce as it was, I think, in the military, where every day I'm just adapting, like, trying to change things, and and whereas now it just, you kind of adapt, but there's no thought process put to it. Daily life, like, you just kind of I was supposed to go get groceries, and that didn't happen, so I waited 3 o'clock and I went and got groceries in the truck, got home or something. So you just adapt, and you don't even think about it anymore now, I find.
Good point. Yeah. Shaun?
Yeah, just listening to the fellas there, something struck me as a possibility. I don't know. I've never really thought of it until now, in respect to adaptability, and why some people may struggle when they get out of the military, and why some people may not. And it's this, I look at Tip. His career was mega long in respect to mine. And so over the full extent of his career, he had no other choice than to learn. Even if he was fighting it, he had to learn how to adapt. Just over the massive body of work that he was involved in, he was obligated to learn how to adapt, even if he didn't want to learn, as a bizarre thought concept. But obviously, he learned how to adapt. And now let's look at John as an example. I mean, he started learning how to adapt from the age of 13. So it doesn't matter how long his military career was, which was also long. He was learning it from a young age, well before the military. And so when those two fellas got out, they had a body of work, we'll call it, that allowed them to then move into the veteran community or into the civilian world and be more adaptable. Which is in marked contrast to someone who may get into the military, and let's pretend, as a thought construct, they're an 18-year-old kid. They've had an easy peasy life, good grades in school, standard issue household, well balanced. They get into the military. They serve 3 years. They go through some really tough times, things that they never ever thought they would face. And then 3 years later, they're standing on Civilian Street on a sidewalk, not being able to adapt because they never learned how to adapt before the military. They never spent enough time in the military learning to adapt. But in that short stint, they had to face so much that many years later, they're still struggling with all of that stuff because they aren't adaptable. They were never taught how to adapt. Now, I look at myself as an example. And, I had some struggles through my childhood before I joined the military, which aren't relevant to this. But when I joined the military, I had a way about me. I just didn't know what it was. The Army showed me what my way was. And my way was, I was pretty adaptable. I knew how to adapt really quickly. And so the Army taught me a bunch of things. And then once they taught me a bunch of things, they also exposed me to, hey, you know what, Shaun? By the way, you're a really out of the box thinker. So how about you spend some time doing that for a while? And so my adaptation was taught to me by the military, was then formalized as, you actually work outside of the box better, go do that. And so when I jumped onto Civilian Street out of my military career, even though I found it challenging, man, I did. I managed to adapt, maybe better than a lot of people who got out, which again, as now has me in my 7th career, and reasonably successful careers, by the way, over the years. But that never would have been the case if I was that kid who had a good life, spent 3 years in the military, got out, and now was, hands in the air thinking, what do I do now? I don't even know how the world works.
That's a great point. And you guys all bring up a great thought here, is that it's a teachable skill, right? It's not something that either some people have or some people don't, or some people have the traits for it. But it is something that we can actually learn over time. So if you were to teach someone how to be adaptable, what would be some of the cornerstones of that? What do you guys think would be the teaching points, for lack of a better term, in order to get someone to see the adaptability of life?
I mean, with me, when I was doing my transition into and started, I was moving into becoming an actor. I went to Adaptation. So obviously, I was 47 years old. Nearest age to me was a mature student, was 24. And then beyond that, it was like 18 to 21-year-olds. So the mature student wouldn't speak with 18 to 21-year-olds because they were wonderful, but she was like, oh, to be 18 again. I was like going, wasn't that 2 minutes ago for you? But it was like maybe a whole lifetime before for me. But with it, what I found in these young people, and they were intelligent, they had appetite for what they wanted to become, they're talented, they'd been through auditions to get themselves in the space of what we were doing. But it was the life skills that I think you could, if you were lucky enough to have a good mentor or a good sort of family framework, that mentorship happens throughout your life. But I think if you get fundamentals early on survivability, and what I tried to teach for the young people that I was training with was just, if you want to become an actor, it's the most overpopulated and tough industry in the world. And I wouldn't say it, coming from as a Royal Marines commando, I'd say it as just in, employability and getting jobs. It's really, really hard. So what they have to do, and it wasn't a preaching thing. I just say, look, this is my nugget of wisdom, being the grumpy old git I am, is the fact is that if you survive, you have to survive to act. So therefore, that employs all those adaptable skills. You have to you have to forward think. You can't be, you have to sort of like say, have everything in place so you can react to potential jobs or auditions or anything. You have to say, where am I going to live? How am I going to feed myself? How am I going to keep myself going so I'm fit enough to be able to do it? How am I going to be employed in another job that gives me the ability to move forward and surge out and do my auditions or do whatever else, but come back if that doesn't go well? So you have to have that, there's got to be adaptability, and you've got to plan every sort of scenario, because it's such an unpredictable career and industrial choice. But for me, the fundamentals for every young person or somebody coming through is for them to have an understanding of their personal survivability and their own responsibility. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? That's a certain, as an individual. And I think if you learn that at a young age, some people, exactly like John said, it's thrown in at bang. If you don't, you're gonna fall off the wavelength. And it's just that strength of mind just to be able to just switch that and understand that, and not have to do it because it is a matter of survivability, but do it through a matter of ownership. You know what I mean? So they can adapt to anything comes their way. So I think it's just that full understanding of a person as a person, to have your survivability understood and what life entails, rather than being under the umbrella of a house, a loving family and home where everything's sort of in a way presented to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of like the idea of putting the gas mask on yourself first, or the oxygen mask on yourself. You got to be able to survive, to help. You got to be able to live, to do whatever, right? Yeah, absolutely. John, thoughts?
Yeah, a couple of things there. When you talk about how you teach that. There's a few different ways, and things that come to my mind is letting people know there's more than one way to do a task. Like, and I think, Chance, you were kind of get on this at the beginning there about the military, how they, they're very focused on it's their way, and they don't want you to go. And it kind of goes into my next point of positivity. And Shaun, I'm going to throw this out as well, as you were talking about the shorter career and how maybe people have a little bit of trouble when they get out. Still, I think for myself, I think the military is really good at talking about being flexible and being able to change and adapt and overcome and all this stuff. I think we're really good at talking about it. But when you do it, and I'll say this as a younger soldier, private, corporal, maybe even sometimes master corporal, it's not always a positive experience. And I'll say that because you'll adapt and you'll overcome on a mission or a task, and they get shit on because you didn't do this, didn't do that, or your chain of command is not being 100%, supportive of that. And, so there's, I think, and then when you get out, you want to adapt and overcome it, but you're a little bit nervous. You're a little bit reserved. You're still thinking that somebody might come out and somebody might not be as positive towards your, what you're doing. So maybe you're reserved and you're holding that back a bit. So I think the military is really good at talking about it. I don't think they're very good at teaching it all the time. And I'll say that especially for the Canadian military. So if I was teaching it, I think teaching everybody that there's more than one way to do a task. There's not one. And I'll go to the public school system. There's one way to teach. Well, no, there's people learn a million different ways. We gotta figure that out as educators and to teach them, right? Mm-hmm. And thinking 2 steps ahead at all times. You're moving along, you're in life, and you'll always got to be 2 steps ahead thinking, and that way you can adapt and overcome the task very quickly if you're already thinking those 2 steps ahead. So yeah, understanding there's more than one way and be thinking a couple steps ahead of the way, and always be positive. Keep that adapting and overcoming positive, because the minute you start going down the rabbit hole, like I got to overcome, you're like, oh man, my task is I can't complete it no more. I'm done. I can't go on with life. Well, no, you just got to come up with a new way of doing it. And I think the reaction is the best outcome. How you react to adapting and overcoming. And that's kind of how I would teach it. I think about how to do it.
That's awesome. I used to have a friend of mine that we'd play chess with regularly. Him and I would play chess all the time. And he was a very dogmatic, linear thinker when it came to the chessboard. And I could see he was a better chess player than I was in terms of I guess he knew more of the actual strategies. But every so often I'd get so lost in I'm getting beat. Oh my goodness. And he's kind of come around here and I'm 6 or 7 moves into it. I'm like, oh, I'm going to get, and I'd be like, you know what? Screw it. And I'd just randomly move a piece completely outside what we were actually doing on this side of the board. And it would throw him. And his whole strategy would be gone, and he would just it'd be a real challenging thing. So it can happen where if you're thinking one way, this is the way that's going to be, and that gets thrown in your face, that's that's a hard lesson. Shaun, any thoughts on teaching?
Yeah, on adaptability, I'd say this, something else that came to mind while the fellas were talking is, before you even think about adapting, you've actually got to know that you need to adapt. So you've kind of got to be in the real time. You've got to be aware of who you are and what's going on right now. And I look at John as an example. I mean, it was obviously pretty clear to him when he was 13 years of age what was going on. It's not that he couldn't get real with that. It was right up in his present time. But that's a pretty dramatic moment. It's a pretty drastically clear moment that no one should be able to misunderstand what needs to happen next. But dialing it way back from that moment to more nuanced moments where people they are required to adapt based on the moment that is occurring to them. If it's not so evident to them, if it's not clear enough to them, then maybe they're not adapting because they're just not seeing that adaptation is necessary. So first of all, you've got to be sensitive to the real time as to whether adaptation needs to occur. And now I'm sorry, John, I have to apologize a little bit because I know it would have been a sensitive moment for you when you were 13, but at that age, not only would it have been evident to you that this was occurring, but you would have also had to have applied an extremely strong prioritization in order to move beyond that moment. It wasn't a case of you were then going to have to deal with it at a 1 out of 10. You're going to have to dial up that rotary dial to actually just move forward the next day. You had to prioritize to keep moving forward in an adaptive manner, especially at that age. And so the two things that came to mind as I was listening to John tell his story is you need to be aware of what's going on. And the only way you can be aware of that is your contextualization of who you are leading up to that moment. If you've got no life experience, if you're a 30-year-old man with no life experience and you're trying to contextualize the real time in a bandwidth that is about that narrow versus the guy next to you who's lived more in one day than you've lived in your entire life, well, your contexts are going to be different, and your realization of how you need to adapt is going to be different, and your prioritizations are going to be different. So figure out what's going on, figure out how to prioritize against that, and then begin the adaptation process.
Mm. These are all great points. And I really do wish I had this happen when I was running through basic and going, oh, this will be quite helpful. Now, Tip, I had this question for you specifically. Tip, was you're jumping from character to character, from mindset to mindset when you're doing different theater jobs or doing the TV or anything, the TV shows or any of the other acting options. Is it challenging to be able to slide into each one of those characters? Does it take, do you have to focus on it, or is it more of just a fluid, I become this person now?
Well, for me, no, I absolutely love it. I think that's probably the biggest attraction to having a career, being a storyteller, spinning dicks, telling tales, is because it is that variation of, because you obviously try to get in the mindset of different characters who really, in the sort of the theatre and the things I like doing. I mean, I've worked with puppets and everything, but I love that because even you animate them and make them live, and they're always based on somebody or an incident in your life. And I think it's like Shaun said, you've got a life history and a life experience, which is pretty damn wide and chunky, and with a full roller coaster involved in it. So I've got I can base characters in so many different complex people that I've met during my time, which is nice. But you don't mimic them. You obviously, there's a big part of yourself in there. You just use that as a guidance, and you can sort of feel the way and feel in, getting in towards it. And that's what I enjoy. But it can be challenging when you have other variables involved, like a director who's mega pressing down, or something else in production, or the other night we were filming on Monday night. I was filming at Stansted Airport outside London, and it was about -2, -3, but it was meant to be maybe summertime in California. So we're one thin layer, bit of body armor, weapons. It was there for 5 or 6 hours. Because I've got a life of being in extremely cold places, doing extremely hard things, it was no problems. But there was some serious borderline hypothermia cases amongst cast and crew.
Funny.
But it's I'm like that. So in a way, I had that little sneaky soul-stealing look going, ooh, that'll learn you. But it wasn't like that at all. It was, we had to get the production done. It was just, I have your soul. But it wasn't like that. It was, but I love it. I can only be an actor now because of all that life experience, and being able to adapt I truly live by it. But I feel it's life experience back living in Ireland, through the troubles, joining the Corps, becoming in the Marines. It's all those highs and lows and that ability to. But the thing that John said there, which I do, and I do get it, because everyone has to have a goal, or some way that they have to look forward. That risk, or have something to always looking on the horizon. Especially as an actor, I'm always searching the horizon for the next the next job or next island I can actually jump into as a work job. But I think you always have to keep covering your arcs as such. But there's a certain thing you've got to enjoy with this little ride, or roller coaster of life, of your job, what you do, what you choose to do. All those seconds and minutes are really, really valuable. So rather than spending your whole life looking forward and scratching towards something, is just have a little lay back in your bath, and just look left and right, enjoy it. And again, you can still be adaptive and still going, right, how can I improve this? How can I move forward? But you're still in the position, in the world that you live in. So there's a certain level of existentialism, but always, I think, why the military mindset helps so much is you always got that little sort of like, you know, your peripheral vision is always checking out your arcs to see what's on the horizon, what the threat is, but also what my next target or what next goal is.
Mm-hmm.
They're all like, you know, really good points, but they all come from experience in military life. And I think because I spent long, and Shaun, you said it, so my conditioning was sort of perfected more with wider, you know, depth of operation, kinetic battle, spread, rank structure. You just all that whole life, you're learning things. So I've got, you know, I'm in a good place myself to look back, and I have a lot of, not a lot, but you know, a thorough whack of friends that really have struggled with the transition and being adapted and adapting to that civilian life.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times when I do chat to them, it's just sort of, you know, back into that little bit of military life where they were like that. They were good operators. They'd done their job. They knew what, they were on point. Just transfer those skills and pull it into life and civilian life. And some of the guys that, I don't know whether they listen to me, but they definitely listen to what my gang of people, of friends, and it works them, because then they're going, you know, instead of, I think a lot of veterans of my friends, a lot of people they struggled outside because it was like, in a way, I'd say 10 years, 20 years ago, you were a second-class citizen if you were military, really. You know what I mean? And now it's come around to go, ooh. And now, because of the changes in the way, I think, for the whole of life and society and that, you are quite a valuable asset, a really valuable asset. And those strengths that you bring from the military, if you can be adaptive and adapt into, you know, fusing that into civilian life and society and business and corporate world, all of a sudden there's a little magic light that, ooh, you're the man, you're the person. You know what I mean? Is able to make things happen. So I think you've got to help our people that are more vulnerable and are struggling with it. I think it's trying to empower them with those, you know, with those overcome and adapt skills, or just, you know, remind them of how good they were. You know what I mean? Or can be.
Yeah, there's some great corollaries in there, and I'm actually going to lay this into John here. Is you've coached boxing for a while, you've boxed a long time, and there's a point where you have to you step away from teaching someone how to throw a punch, and you start teaching them when to throw a punch, or to find that timing or the movement, or to be able to adapt all of those skills into that next stage. Do you find that you know, working with fighters, or even in yourself when you're boxing, that adaptability bleeds into other things? Or do you think other things bleed into the adaptability of the fight?
I think life blends in, adaptability in life every day kind of goes into the task you're doing at the moment, and boxing being one. I mean, as a boxer, once you enter that, you know, that square ring, you get in there and you're adapting every round. You know, you go in there with this big solid plan. You know,
survive contact.
Yeah, it never survives contact first. You know, a great plan never survives first contact. And you know, you go in that ring with your great plan, and you know, you're like, I'm going to come across that ring and I'm going to throw that right hand, and you know, the bell rings and Buddy comes flying across the ring and hits you with a right hand. It's like, so now you're adapting right away, like from second one, right? So I look at fighters, and you got to be able to adapt. You got to be flexible. But you're right. You need to know how to throw all the punches, but you need to know when to throw those punches, and you need to know, you know, what's the right time to do it. Is it the right time to do it? Am I going to stick with straight punches? Am I going to, you know, going to work on the stomach or the head? And people will be like, oh, I watch videos and I do all this stuff and I'm all prepared for fight. Well, I'm always prepared for a mission too. And I can tell you that there's never been a mission I went on that worked out successfully 100%, right? So yeah, it definitely does. It's a great example of adaptability and for fighters. So I was at a fight card this weekend and in Hamilton, and you know, one of the young guys from Hamilton that was fighting, hometown guy, and you know, everybody thought he was gonna, you know, come out on top of the fight card. Well, his opponent just outsmarted him a bit and was throwing some things that he wasn't able to adapt to, and just kept getting caught. And it was the same punch over and over again. And it's funny, I was like, how come he's not adapting to that? How come he's not slipping that? How come he's not trying to throw a hook? Anyway, he went 4 more rounds getting hit with the same punches, but he could not adapt. He had a game plan, and did not want to accept that there was another way of doing it. And, he lost the match. I'm sure his coach is probably going to, give him some guidance and, moving forward and talk about that match and how he could have adapted, overcame, and commit with a different selection of punches or a different selection of movements, left or right, or something to get him going. But yeah, it's definitely a skill that all fighters need. Even when I'm at the club, and I'll give you an example. When I'm teaching a class, I go into the club and I'm talking about a fitness class, not just like a regular, like getting fighters ready or anything, but I'm teaching a fitness class. And sometimes I'll even have it on the board, my whole workout done. I got my music set, I got everything going. And all of a sudden somebody will walk in that classroom and I'm like, oof, like, this is not the workout for that person. Like, or there's a couple of people to show up. And I'm like, wow. But from being in the military, I open up my black book and I have a plan. I always have a second, a third, and a fourth sitting in my book. So I look at the board, I wipe it off, and I do another plan right away, 2 minutes before the class. And just so everybody in the class is successful. I want to keep it positive. I want a positive experience. I don't want someone to leave and go, that class really sucked. That was so hard. I'm going to be sore. I can't do it. Yeah, I want to push them, but I don't want to tear them away either, right? So you want them to come back and you want them to be able to enjoy that experience. So I have to adapt half the time when I'm teaching classes, or if I'm teaching how to do burpees, or skipping. Most women will tell me I'm not going to skip. After having children and stuff like that, most women will not skip. That's a different conversation for another day. But so what do? I adapt it right away. I change it. Let's not skip. Let's do something different, and I give them another exercise right away. Yeah. So just being able to adapt in your class every day in everyday life, and for myself, I have to adapt. Even teaching, I deal with a brain injury, so I forget. My memory is about as big as a dime. Mm-hmm. I write things down. I have calendars in my house. I have alerts on my phones. I probably had to look at my calendar 8 times for today to make sure I had this timing down right, stuff like that. So I have to adapt every day. Standing in front of a group of people teaching. In the military, I'd stand in front of 400 people. Not a problem. What do you want to do? What do you want to hear? I could teach. I could tell you what to do. Well, now I struggle standing in front of 3 people trying to teach a class at boxing. So I had to adapt. I had to figure that out. How can I do this so I feel comfortable teaching the class? And, my way was I needed to do the class with them. I can't sit there and teach. I need to do. Yeah. So you come into my class, man, I am all over the place. I'm doing jumping jacks. I'm shadow boxing. I'm hitting the bag. I'm skipping. I'm doing everything with the people because it takes the attention off of me. And I'm just blending with the group. And that's for myself how I adapted to that, right? And so I think, there's not too much in life these days that I don't have to adapt to. Like everything from, going on a trip on March break to making sure I have everything in place so I don't, you don't forget my kid anywhere or forget myself anywhere.
Have a home alone situation.
Yeah, I get home and I'm like, oh man, I think I forgot something there. So yeah, it's like every day now. And and one thing though has helped me with it is boxing for sure. Boxing has brought me so far, man. Like, with agility, balance, and adaptability. It taught me how to stand in front of people again. It got me into exercise again. And so it's definitely helped me. And I think one of those things we talked about earlier is like when you get out, when you do get out of the military, you're adapting at that moment. So talk about people having struggles. Well, I can see it for sure. You're actually just left something that you're very comfortable and you're probably very good at, and now you're just Johnny O'Neill sitting on City Street the next morning, going, whoa, like 300 people are not going to listen to me anymore. I can stand in front of a crowd of people at a mall and start yelling and stuff. Nobody's going to listen to me anymore. I'm not a master warrant officer. I'm Johnny O'Neill. Like, so you talk about adapting. You were adapting hard, man. Like, you no longer have a rank. You can no longer tell everybody what to do. Like, you're not, you're not who, as much as you think you're a superhero, you're not that guy anymore. You got to adapt and figure out who you are. And I think having things in place when you do release, like coaching boxing or volunteering somewhere with a kinsman group or something, having something, adapting to those organizations to keep you on track is definitely key.
Yeah. I think it's Mike Tyson said, everyone's got a plan to get punched in the face.
Yeah.
Right. You got to be ready for it. Shaun, you've done quite a bit of adapting over the years, but I wanted to ask about riding in the 24-hour solos and coaching those as well, because that's continuous adaptation, right? In the moment, you are constantly assessing and adapting and changing, and all of a sudden your tire's flat, and now you got it. Like, what were some of the not so much the challenges there, but let's actually talk about some of the successes in your riding career of like massive adaptations. What do you got?
Yeah, sure. It's a good question. Actually, it plays well as a decent platform to make the point on adaptability. Because when both John and Tip were speaking, I was thinking how easy it must be for these guys to understand adaptability. Because, I mean, look at their careers. I mean, there's just no way that you don't learn adaptability. But there's many people out there who have neither been in a setting where they've been taught how to adapt, nor have they been in a setting where even if they're not being taught, somehow they've got to figure it out themselves. And so if you've never been in a moment where you're pressure tested, and I'm not talking about you broke your pencil lead next to the pencil sharpener, next to the water cooler, because you got to do that spreadsheet, that ain't pressure. I'm talking about legit pressure that causes adaptation. Heavy pressure situations, not spreadsheet situations. And so 24-hour solos are a perfect example of that, because to both John and Tip's point, there's people who will live a day and not experience anything. But there's people who will live a day and live an entire life's worth of experiences within that day. And so it depends on how you fill your day, and it depends on how you have filled your life. So if every day for you at the age of 40 has been Groundhog Day, you don't have much of a story to tell, except one day. But if you've been living really full days, you've got eternities of stories to tell in context of the person who's been in Groundhog Day. So there's a massive delta from individual to individual in respect to understanding of adversity. A 24-hour solo fills the day full of things. And after that 24 hours of nonstop racing, it feels like you crammed a year into a day. It's just how it feels. And so if you're managing to do that with every day of your life, you've lived eons in context of your neighbor who, you know, maybe their peak of their month is mowing the lawn. And so how do you fill your day? How did you fill your life? When I started racing mountain bikes, I just got out of the military. I wanted to do something hard. And I lined up on a start line as a Category 5 racer, which is the lowest dregs of racing society, and raw amateur, total beginner. And I was so new to the game that as I stood on the start line, I looked to my left and right, and I thought, who are these skinny dudes? I'm going to kick their ass. And race gun went off, bam, and that's the last I saw them. I never saw them again. They all blitzed off the line. I was like, what? And I tried to keep up, and I couldn't, because they knew the game and I didn't. I thought I was a badass and I sucked. And so I've said this before, and I'll make the story short. I was so dead last that by the time I crossed the start line, they'd actually tore the start line down. They were packing up their race and all leaving. And a volunteer is an old lady. She looked at me as I came across the start line in slow motion. She did this. Don't worry, it'll get easier. And I thought, what is even going on? I used to be a tier 1 warrant officer. Why is this happening? Because I thought I was a badass. And to some degree I was, but not in racing, by the way. And so that was my entry into the sport. And then at some point I became a world champion in 24-hour solo mountain bike racing. And that was, you know, I started a day and I went to Z. But that path to get there was freaking hard. And I had to cram a whole lot of life into it in order to seek that moment. And whether I ever became a world champion or not, I mean, I wanted to be one. I'd set it as a goal. But if I never became one, that would have been all right, because it's the journey, baby. It's the journey. And so the moment that I stood on that start line and got my ass whooped, that was the start of another new journey for me, heading towards an outcome that I didn't understand, that I had to do a whole pile of adaptation in order to become the kind of athlete, the kind of competitor, the kind of wise racer that I needed to be, which then turned me into a high performance race coach and yada, yada, yada. And so I had to adapt a lot. I had to learn a lot. I had to like really crack the homework. A lot of books were read. A lot of people were talked to. A lot of weird science driven minded people that I never would have met, that I thought these are weird dudes, eventually became really good friends because they were smarter than me. They weren't that weird. I was the weird one because I was the dimwit in the room. And so it was my job to figure out how little I knew, which I pretty quickly realized I knew next to nothing. And then along the way, got exposed to how little I knew, which was humbling. Humiliating was probably a more correct word. And at the end of it, we'll call it, I came away wiser for it through all of that deep living life adaptation just in racing.
Mm-hmm. I had a similar event when I first started jiu-jitsu, and I got tied in knots by a 16-year-old girl, and big 6'6", 220 dude coming out of the army, like, all right, I'm ready for this. Oh boy, was I not! I was not ready for it at all. And as you were talking, Shaun, it really blends into what I wanted to kind of move into, is that as you adapt, as you slowly, or sometimes quickly move away from what you know, over time, that creates an evolution. That's where you're no longer just adapting to a new situation. You are now completely evolving to manage that situation, whether that be for good, positive, whatever, good or negative, positive or negative. But once you evolve, and you have to restart that adaptation to either new career, new life. I mean, when all of a sudden I became a dad, that was right. That's an adaptation in the beginning,
Yep.
But you eventually evolve into being a dad, right? I don't know if you ever feel like a dad for a first little bit when you first have your first kid, but eventually you become a dad, right?
Mhm.
That's the way it becomes. And what I'm wondering is, was that evolution seen in it, or was it hindsight for you guys when you hit those major evolution points where all of a sudden you're no longer, you're not a tier 1 warrant officer now you're a computer systems engineer, and you're not a Royal Marine Commando anymore, now you're an actor. Did you see that evolution, or was it hindsight, like, oh, I guess now I'm an actor kind of deal? Chip, what do you got?
Well, no, for me, it was a proactive decision, wasn't it? So initially, I just see myself mapping across the skills rather than, should we say, life-threatening situations. Being in a situation where you can still tell the tale and spin the dip, tell the stories, but not put your life in threat when you are a father and a grandfather and everything else. I thought, and yeah, and like I say, it's an age thing. I was wearing reading glasses, so you're moving on. So you're, no matter how we keep ourselves in good nick. I mean, I'm in mid-50s now. I'm 55 this year, so my eyesight isn't calling a fire mission in when you're trying to look at your map. Is a bit different when you have to put your reading glasses on, and if you're in contact at the time, it's just a bit harder. Yeah. And I think it's not very credible, probably, in my situation. So for me, I was like doing something different, and the adventure in that, like I say, that spectrum that we have, the roller coaster of life in the military, being an actor, it satisfies my condition or my needs over the time, and I enjoy it. But the pre-planning aspect of it was, I was going to be a storyteller. The practical side of becoming an actor as a storyteller rather than a writer, which again, it's not something I'm doing at the minute as well, but it was because those were the skills that I had accredited. And like John said, when you're lecturing, you're in charge, you've got that energy. It's a bit like being in the theater. You're on point because you're the master of what you're delivering. And when you give a lecture or you're giving some sort of like presentation in the military, you know your own point, because even when you question, you know it, you even hang it in a slightly theatrical way before you pose a question. So you've got that energy with people all the time. So you've got that confidence. And when you become an actor, when you're telling a story, you've got to harness that similar confidence, or, similar confidence when you become the character. Because when people are dependent on the character, but when you're in that environment, you have to live as that being, and that living as a being, even if it's day to day, no matter what struggles in life you have, you can see what a real life person is, and then you can see that somebody who's trying to act it. It's similar. So it's a lot of skills that I've learned in that way. But for me to say, oh, right, this is it, it's pre-planned. It's a bit like becoming a father, exactly like you said, Chance. When I became a dad, I remember, when you do become a dad, you're going, is that really possible? Is that? You keep so look at you like, do I do that? Was I part of that? It's mega weird. But then you are, and then there's just certain things, and I see more of it maybe with hindsight as you get older. Those little links, or those little, should we say, family links or blood tie links, you see, it's quite spooky. You know that the nature nurture. Is it nature or nurture? But sometimes when I'm walking down the street, you catch a glimpse in the reflection in the window. Am I seeing my father? And I go, "Yeah, Jesus!" But it's not. It's me. But it's this way I'm walking, because I'm in the world of my own, and I just got this glimpse in the peripheral vision in the reflection of the window, and it's my father, and I'm going, "Whoa!" And it's just something that makes us turn. It's definitely it's definitely a nature nurture.
Yeah.
Argument. So again, like a child, I thought because we're in this society, I thought, yes, I'll end up being a dad. But when it happens, it was just that, that disbelief that you don't feel that you're grown up enough to be a dad, but you are, because you're a human being and you're that age and you can create children and whatever else. But then it just carries on, and I think it's you have to be extremely adaptable, flexible, supportive, being a parent and being a father. I think it's really, really important. And hopefully, things have went all right, and my kids look and respect me for that.
Yeah.
Don't chase them up, or don't phone them up and ask them. They might actually have different variations or different issues. But for me, it's not planned, but it's still. I joined the Royal Marines to become a Royal Marines mountain leader. It happened. A lot of trials and tribulations for me to become that, especially the variables inside institutions like the Royal Marines and any military organization. No matter, and every person here that's been in the military knows that not every pathway is a smooth pathway to get your goal in the military service. Yeah. So that's something we can take for granted across the board. But the focus, and we spoke about it before, so the focus and say that I will be that. I mean, like, even if it was train actor, exactly the same. I will be an actor. Whether I'm a good actor or not depends on how you train me. After that, I own it, and I will. I'll never stop training, but I will be an actor. It's not like, it's not like I won't be an actor. I will. I will be it. I will pass.
Dude, you are.
Yeah, you are.
I am. I am a completely. That is what I am. But it's.
I just wish you could get a grip on that big hair.
I know. It's not. I need it. I finished that play, so it's got to be down.
When you were talking about walking along and seeing your reflection in a window, I thought, man, that must have been a massive window for that head of hair.
So what about yourself, Shaun? What do you think you're evolving?
Yeah, so on evolution, I would start it off with the word that we began with, and that's adaptation. And you talked about, we're talking about becoming a dad. Well, here's how it worked for me. The moment I held the first one in my hand, I was like, oh, time to adapt. And so what did that mean to me? That meant that it was an instant career change, because the first time that package came along, I couldn't duck Silver Hornets anymore. And so I stopped international security consulting, which is a loose term. And then I didn't leave Canada again to go and do that for quite a long time. So, that's when I ended up buying a coffee shop in downtown Calgary and started working on a 3-group espresso machine, 3-group head espresso machine, and running a busy coffee shop. That's what I did for a couple of years when our firstborn came along. And so that onto the next topic, which is evolution. Here's an interesting thought on evolution. I find, at least for myself, like I evolve at a pretty good rate. Certainly now, based on when I was younger, I didn't evolve as fast because I just didn't have context. I wasn't surrounded by as many amazing people as I am now. And evolution is caused by, well, reflection, of course, and understanding what you can become. Perhaps you'll never change unless you think you're perfectly where you need to be. You've got to want more in order to evolve. And so I'm lucky to be in a spot where I find evolution to be easy now because there's so many inspiring people. But the evolutionary process for me works like this. I can evolve pretty quickly, but where I evolve rapidly is when I'm evolving for a team. And so back in the military, if I was as a young buck just first getting in, I evolved to some degree. But the moment that I had to evolve to make my team better, oh, well, now it's on. Now it was like just fuel on the furnace. And I was better at evolving when I was trying to evolve for those around me versus evolving for myself. And I still find that to be the same way even today. So in respect to the collective, as it were, I come over here and I do my best, but I'm doing my best for the team because that's how I feel I show up best in an evolutionary process, is to try and do it better for everyone.
That's a great point. John, you have any points on evolution?
Yeah. I really agree with Shaun. I think the evolution, it does become easier, and I think adding purpose to it, like you talk about in the team aspect, evolution is a lot easier. I think because it adds that purpose. When you're evolving just solely for yourself, sometimes you can be lazy. You can say, "Hey, no, I need to. Like, it's for me." Like you don't always have to if it's just for you. But when you have to change for a group, you have to evolve. I think you do that a lot easier, a lot faster. For myself, I do. It gives me purpose, right? Purpose of what I'm doing. And sometimes I could be lazy. I'm like, hey, I could change right now and do things a different way, but I'm just going to keep it going. But when you add a team into it, I change for sure. So I think the experience with that evolution is definitely something. You talk about kids as well, like having kids, how you evolve. I think, my God, and you still evolve. Like I look at my kids right now, my 15-year-old boy has just strolled in the house and I'm like, it might be something I have to evolve to in about 15 minutes. I don't know, right? So it just changes by the day. Sometimes they walk in and it's an adventure. It's something new every time. It's, like you just don't know. So I think evolution is happening, throughout the day with children. It evolves and it evolves more and more. When you talk about adapting with my kids, I think that happens every day. Like my daughter will walk in and throw something like totally to the left field out there at me, and I'll be like, oh my God, how am I going to deal with this? But you do deal with it. You stop, you absorb her for a few minutes, you think about it, and then you make a plan and execute it, and you evolve to that. I think adapting becomes easier in life the older you get. I find now I just adapt. I just go through life and I'm adapting, and sometimes I don't even realize it. Like I had a solid plan to go do something, it didn't work out, and I adapted and it worked out fine, and I don't think twice about it. So I think as with age, I think it just becomes easier. I think you evolve in the adaptation. I think you evolve to the point where it becomes second nature, and you change. It's like a drill. It's like changing a magazine. You just kind of go with it now, and there's not too much in life that gets thrown at me that I'm like, man, like how am I going to get over this? Now I just kind of be like, this is going to be a good challenge, and I go with it, and I just I accept it, and I conquer it. I make it a point that I don't lose, I win, and in order to win, sometimes you have to adapt, and it's several different approaches to get you to that finish line, but you'll get there if you're willing to change and make the change needed to win.
Yeah. There's I was listening to a podcast a little while ago. I don't know if you guys listened to it. It's called Hardcore History. If you don't, you should. The
Yeah,
guy,
occasionally.
Dan
Yeah,
Carlin.
I do need to listen to it more frequently for sure.
He brought up a great point. He was talking about the Romans again, and they very early on in the empire was the Romans never lost, and the reason they never lost was because they never actually admitted to losing. Right? They'd lose entire armies in the field and have their entire city surrounded by the enemy, and they'd be like, "Yeah, we're good.
Didn't
Cool.
happen.
Yeah, whatever. That didn't happen, right? We didn't lose. No,
We
we're
won.
not. We're going to continue winning." And that's why they were so. That's what he attributes to how they were so successful. Is it didn't matter the issues in the moment. It didn't matter that there was losses in the field or whatever, because they were going to win in the end, and they were just going to keep
That
coming.
seems like a Monty Python sketch, that, doesn't it?
Isn't it though? just not
Yeah,
give it
but-
up completely.
Oh, what do you mean?
It's the exact scene from the Black Knight, right?
The bridge.
The bridge and the Black Knight, where he just chopping arms off, and 'tis but a scratch. And
That's
you're
how I
just
live my
like,
life,
oh,
man.
I love that. So we're almost.
I
an
do.
hour.
I would like to
Yeah,
throw
more
this
point?
in,
Yeah, man.
just as a little metric for anyone who's listening to this. Every once in a while, at least once during these discussions each day, I try to figure out a way to throw out a tip or a tool or a lever or a widget or something that someone can grasp onto. Maybe 1 in 10 will it'll work for them. But one thing that I tried to do from very early on in our boys' lives is I'm trying to adapt them to the world around them, but I'm adapting 2 levels up. I'm trying to teach my boys, but I'm trying to teach them how to teach their boys. I'm trying to teach 2 generations deep. So when I'm leading them by example, I'm leading their kids by example. I want my boys to understand how to lead their boys. And so I'm not just responsible for the small-minded trying to make my kids better. I'm trying to make their kids better. So if you want a metric, if you want to keep yourself honest, if you want to raise up your level of your game, try to teach your kids how they need to teach their kids. And you'll find it challenging, and I think you'll find it useful.
That's a great point, a great outlook on it too, because you're not just looking at it. It's not the face value of what you're working on. It's the next phase of it, which is fantastic. Any final thoughts on adaptation, evolution from anybody? Everybody good to go?
It's just what Shaun said there, just the family, the generational thing. It's mega spooky because I used to hear people saying this: when we become a grandparent, it's so much easier, so much more enjoyable than being a parent. And now, with hindsight, it is so true. It's unbelievable, and it's weird. It's like when you're a parent, you're like a grown up, but when you're a grandparent, you're like a kid again. It's absolutely awesome. But it's that, that joy. I know that you said the old kids are that there. Well, mine, it's like they look at me going, "Why are you behaving like a child?" You know what I mean? In a way, because I can, because it's sort of worked with you. So it's just that next generation you transform. So I don't know, maybe it's full circle, but it is so, and it isn't. I love my kids and they're growing up and everything, but it's just that I think that responsibility you have, that first generation. I don't know whether it's a natural thing or it's a social thing that's been constructed in my head. But now with my grandkids, it's absolutely, I'm back to being, I'm there. I'm with them. But the energy and the adventures and everything else you have is brilliant, because I feel assured that the moral understanding of what's right and wrong and what the world is about, that's given to them by their parents, which I got. So it's like full circle. So I don't even have to give any of that guy. It's there. It's there already. So maybe it is successful, but it's quite weird that landing on with your grandkids is magical. I love it. So for you guys that are grandparents, if you're not, look forward to it. It's awesome.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And you know what, buddy? I hear what you just said. I hear it so often, so much so that I know it to be true even though I don't have grandkids yet. But I know that if and when it happens, I know that what you just said is gonna be factual for me as well.
Yeah, it's looking forward to it. I got a few stages to go through before I'm a
Oh, listen, I'm not looking to rush forward to it. I'm not like trying to get there tomorrow.
Yeah, I know. Don't jump into it.
I'll take the days that I've got.
Yeah. I got a few. John, any final thoughts before we shut her down?
No, yeah. And one thing I will add, we talk about the evolution, and look at the military. Talk about adapting and evolution. Look, when you join the military, you go from being a civilian, someone that knows nothing about the military. You join that military, you adapt to it, you continue on adapting to your trained, and then you will evolve to become an amazing leader within the Canadian Armed Forces or whatever military you're in. So when you look at that adaptivity and the evolution, I think the military is an amazing example of watching somebody going from joining to retiring and seeing that journey and how they adapt and evolve to a total different person, and then watch them undo all that in retirement.
Yeah.
And evolving back to being a civilian again. It's an amazing concept, and it's pretty cool to see, and just to follow somebody through that, career through a journal or something. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
As long as they continue to realize and believe that they can continue to adapt, which
100%.
is not always the case.
Yeah, 100%. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. And the the nice part about this is, well, first off, I want to correct something. I don't think we ever become civilians again. I think once you are a civilian, and then you're a soldier, and then you're a veteran, because you'll never be that 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old kid again. Like that's not happening.
Until you become a grandfather.
There you go. I guess that's the way.
There
But
it is.
and Chance, let's be honest, I don't want to be that teenage again.
Yeah, right. Oh
Right.
man.
Neither do we. We don't want you to be either.
If I want.
Well, we're just over an hour here again, guys. I can't thank you enough. This has been an awesome chat. Thank you so much again, Tip, for joining us, and Shaun, always a pleasure. If you haven't already, make sure that you do. You hit the subscribe button up there in the corner, and make sure you follow us, because every day we're learning new stuff, we're growing, and we're building here on the Collective. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Chimo.
Chimo.
Yeah.